You know, one of the hardest things to do is to be able to color adverse woods, meaning in the case like here where we want our dovetails to show, to be able to dye the dovetails and then attach them to, in this case, a piece of white maple. It's not impossible, but if you glue it up, it pretty much is. There's a reason. One of the things, I mean, even if you tape these off, one of the things that's going to happen is that a dye or stain will migrate, meaning it's going to soak into that end grain and it can bleed into your white or your lighter colored woods. So what you have to do is you have to separate them. Now, to understand that, we've got a little mock-up here of what I'm talking about. The first thing you have to do, irrespective of anything, is you're going to have to color separately. Meaning, again, there's just, you know, I've taken these things and I've, you know, coated all this with a finish or shellac or something like that, and then try to dye a dovetail, and it just doesn't work. The issue here, again, is migration of the color. So the way we handle it, first of all, I will say this. In the case of this drawer right here, that's, you know, we got a half-blind dovetail, and that's mahogany. Now, the end grain is always going to show darker, so we simply left it. We didn't attempt to dye the dovetails. But let's assume for a moment we're doing a reverse of this, where we want the side of the drawer dyed, and we want a lighter color on the pins to show through. What you're going to need to do, first of all, is make sure that you have everything fitted. You got to make sure your dovetails are tight, sanded flush, you're done. It's got to be the same as if you were getting ready to color it and it was glued up, except it's not. Now, you know, you can clamp them up and get them true. Then what you're going to want to do, take it apart. Now, if you're using a water-based dye or an alcohol-based dye, and we are, you're fine. If you're using an oil-based stain, then you're going to have an issue. You got to be very, very careful that you don't get it into your tails. If you get it in this case, tails, now it wouldn't matter if I was doing an inlay or what. It's the same thing. So what I want to do here, in that case, I'm going to come in and I'm going to mask these off. Now again, if I'm using a water base, or alcohol base, I'm okay. And the reason for that is it's not putting anything in there that's going to create me a glue issue. So I'm going to get in here and I'm going to mask them off. And I'm going to make sure that nothing gets in there to affect my glue joint. Then I do my coloring. Now you would think at this point you're ready to glue it up. You're not. Because you got to think about something. No matter what you do, you're going to have some glue, you're going to have some glue squeeze out. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to take this and you're going to get some finish on it. Now, no, this hasn't dried enough, but you get the point. I'm gonna get some finish on this. Again, now protecting the tails because we don't want a finish in there that's gonna affect our glue joint. On the pins, I'm just gonna make me a little bit of puddle. I should be using a brush. But all I'm gonna do is put a little bit of finish on the ends of the pins. Now the reason I'm doing this is simply put, is to keep the glue from bonding to the surface and make it easier to clean, so I can get a clean joint. Then, once it's all dry, then I can apply my glue. Now, we always, in this application, we always use a white glue. And the reason we do it, either Elmer's Glue All, Tight Bond, white glue, the reason for it is it dries clear. And if a little bit gets on the surface or something like that, it's not going to be noticeable. But again, the glue is going to allow you to be able to, the finish is going to allow you to be able to wipe off the glue. Now we would just imagine I just glued that, and that's what I've got. What if you were doing we'll just pretend for a moment that this is, say we've got a veneer top and we want to put an outer edge on it of solid, and we want it to be, again, the key here is going to be to make sure that this seam is perfect. Meaning flush and everything else. Now this is what I would do in this situation is I would probably take a biscuit, use a loose tenon, a dowel, whatever, and I would attach it to the table or whatever I was doing and pull it up tight, just as it was going to be glued, and make sure I got everything level, ready to go. This, my solid wood sanded, everything done except glued. Then it's the same exact thing. What I'm going to do is I can dye, put some finish on this surface, dye and put some finish on this surface, protecting the glue surface. And again, I'm going to glue it together. To be able to come back and define that line, a nice, tight, crisp line. I'm going to say it again. It's extremely hard to do. Now, one of the other things that you can do, and I'm going to refer you over to tone coating, is you could put a coat of finish on the whole thing, all glued up and everything. Then you could mask off the solid wood and tone coat it. And the reason for that is the finish is going to allow the tape to create you a crisp line. But the tape's not going to create a crisp line usually on wood because the wood's porous. And again, the colors will migrate. Now, a gel stain would migrate less than a dye. A dye is going to be the worst because it's the thinnest. It's going to penetrate the most. But the problem with a tone coating is it has a little bit of a tendency to mottle or muddy the color a little bit. So in my world, I find it better to do what we've talked about here, and that is to just completely work it separate. And again, biscuits, it's just like this drawer. Being able to pull it together and having everything fit nice and tight to get everything worked, that's what you have to do. basically what it is, you got to get all, once you've got that dye on there and you've got that adverse wood, you have nowhere to sand. If you sand and start doing anything, then you're going to have a little bit of an issue because you go through that color, there you are. Now, what if I was doing a dyed top and I wanted to do an inlay? Well, the easiest way to do it is simply put is to finish the top. And by finish, I mean pretty close to, you've got 2 or 3 good coats of finish on there. Then route out, carve out, and put your inlay in. Again, using white glue. Now, the 2 reasons. One, the white glue is going to dry clear. The second reason is it's going to dry to a hard finish line, a hard line. But what's going to happen is the other thing that I like to do is I can take some packaging tape, some good masking tape, and I lay it down before I do the inlay, before I do the cutting. Then I inlay that piece in, or whatever I'm doing. I inlay it in, then I can sand, and that tape is going to keep me from cutting through that finish. But having a finish on there is very important because that's what's protecting your color. And you sand it down flush with the tape. Then you can come back, and again, the tape's very thin. You can take your finish and there's 2 things. You can take your finish and kind of build over it, but the other thing you can do is you don't have a lot to sand now. You can sand that very gently or take a scraper and scrape it flat. But you got to be careful and don't go through your finish. So, it's not uncommon for me if I'm, let's assume I've got a tabletop and I've got 2 good coats of water-based finish on it. Well, where I'm going to do my inlay, I would probably go in there and spray me a couple more coats on there because I know I'm going to be sanding that down. That gives me something to sand flush to without getting down into the color. Again, the white glue is a big key. Now, can you use a CA glue? You can. CA glue or epoxy, any of that will work. But one of the things, again, with a white glue, when you press it down in there, it's easy to clean. You can wipe it off the surface pretty well. And that works. And again, the white glue is my choice. Titebond 3 would work because, again, it dries to a rigid glue line and it's easy to clean. Or, urea resin, plastic resin, the powder that you use, that you use with veneers, they do very well too. Again, a good rigid glue line and a good water cleanup is very, very important. That's how you handle adverse colors in woods. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but you just got to take your time and you can do it.